It's me. Somewhere around 1965. This was after I was assistant manager and then I quit. But I loved the theater so much I came back and worked part-time as a doorman. And then eventually met a lot of the they got me in the projectionist union, so I worked part-time in the projectionist union here, so I ran the movies here too. But that happened in most of these houses. Everything that I tell you about this Egyptian is almost standard script of what happened to most of these movie palaces across the country.
When the Egyptian Theater in Ogden, Utah first opened in April 1924, it was a more impressive sight than the movies it ran. After the fiery downfall of the Arlington Hotel in 1923, Harmon and Louis Peary appointed architectural firm Hodgson and McLennan to the task of creating the luxurious Egyptian movie palace.
Candy was in here. So this lobby just came this big. And on that side was Schubeck Jewelry, which I remember most of my life for the size theater it is. Theater seats about 850 people. Originally it seated 1,200. So in front row. But back in 1924, there were 1,200 people jammed in this place with those little tiny restrooms and this little tiny lobby. And so I like to point out to people, we are the only movie palace left in the metropolitan area here, and the only one that is restored with the original colors. In other words, the Capitol Theater in Salt Lake.
In 1924, the Egyptian presented Zane Grey's Wanderer of the Wasteland, its first show in history. Van Summerhill remembers coming to the theater as a child when Disney movies would attract such a crowd that children were forced to squeeze up into the smoking sections in order to see the film. Since 1924, much of the architecture and design elements of the Egyptian have remained the same. During the theater's lifetime, it has seen renovations and remodels, but more importantly, many owners.
And to break those figures out, we, the foundation, which I started in 1985, eventually became the owners of this building, and it was the owner, ironically, he wanted more, but he got $250,000, which is exactly what this building cost to build in 1924.
I read that. That's very intriguing that that's what it cost.
I don't know what it's called, but you can figure out 1924 dollars today, and it would be several $1 million, of course, to replace this. That organ is valued at March of 1985. Well, we saved the building, and it took 5 partners. We were one of 5 partners. Heritage Foundation are the actual people who came forth at the last minute and bought the theater. They signed their lives away. They immediately turned it over to us.
The Egyptian Theater Foundation that Summerhill established not only saved the theater from destruction, but also restored it to the beauty it once was.
So to get 5 entities together and put something this complex, it also involved the conference centers and then turned into offices. It was an amazing feat that it was finished. What we do now is, well, we got the organ put back in 2004, so that was the last thing to be back in. As far as the original restoration, we put the curtains in, which are the signatures. They're only used for when movies are run. We use the irregular drapery when live shows are here. We sponsor movies, a few movies each year, classics usually. And
Classics like the 1947 version of Miracle on 34th Street and independent films too. The theater also hosts live concerts and performances. But the nonprofit foundation still requires extra income for the projects they wish to accomplish.
we're trying to raise money to electrify the marquee, which has to go because every single square inch of this building is on the National Register of Historic Places, and so you have to have permission to do any changes to the building, which is a good thing, but it's a tedious thing to deal with. And we want them to make an exception. We'd like to ask them to make an exception and let us electrify the marquee, which is changing individual letters and that. And with electric lights, the way they are now, you can replicate pretty close to what it looked like. In 1951, movie theaters were in a battle for their life with television. And in those days,
Historic movie theaters are always facing a challenge. In 1951, it was the rivalry with television. Now, in 2013, it is the evolution of technology.
boy, that's a real problem now because, as you may know, the studios, by the end of this year, will no longer print film prints. Everything is digital, and those digital projectors are going to mean we're going to lose a lot of small theaters and a lot of drive-ins. The standard examination, most drive-ins are family operated. Those projectors start at $80,000 a piece. And that's not including the sound systems and what have you. We have...
Summerall has his sights set on the Christie LCD projectors. He says they offer the widest and best picture quality with the LED illumination of digital projection.
We have a projector up there now, which is a German projector that was put in when the place opened, and it was recommended by Sundance, seeing we're a venue for Sundance Film Festival here. Anything they want, we're going to give them. And it's a unique projector. It runs 35 and 16 millimeter. Well, at the time, that was a great deal, but now I think all of Sundance is digital. We have an intermediate digital projector that we bought that is going to have to be replaced by the traditional new ones that are $70,000, $80,000. And in fact, what we've been using for our classic movies on this digital projector we have, it was an expensive one when we got it, and it's a very good one, but it's not the same thing that the theaters are running. So, but we could run DVDs and Blu-ray on it, and then we get a good picture in the theater. But 20th Century Fox has told us.
Just as the moviegoer's experience has transformed through time, so must the technology used to create that experience.
films come in now in a little box thing like this, like a super hard drive. You plug it in the projector and download it, the film. Standard Fox is saying rest of the theaters. So we're trying to decide what to do, because a lot of the old films, archival films, we haven't been able to run in 35 millimeter because they want you to have two projectors and run what they call reel to reel. In other words, you can't splice them all together like they have been doing the last couple of decades, because these films are there's only one or two or maybe three prints of each of these films, and every time you splice them, you damage the film, maybe lose a frame or two. So on the one hand, we're kind of waiting to see what the other historic theaters are doing, and film whether it's still going to be available from these archives or not, or whether they're going to shut it off completely, we don't know. But the irony of it is, they're giving these 35 millimeter projectors away, and so we have no problem getting them now if we have film to run on them. But eventually, I guess we'll have both.
At the historic Kentucky Theater in Lexington, Kentucky, manager Fred Mills says other historical movie houses are also having to switch over to the new Christie projectors. He says in order to continue showing the artsy and independent films that otherwise wouldn't come to Kentucky, the need for the new projectors was mandatory.
We have mostly Christie projectors. We have two projectors that are 3D. Everything is digital now.
This theater had very small restrooms, as did most of them that come out of this period. People I guess, didn't have to go to the bathroom back in the 20s. But traditionally, in most of these theaters, for some reason, the men's restrooms were always downstairs under the lobby, and the women's were always upstairs. In a goodly percentage of these theaters.
When the Egyptian bought the neighboring stores, they were able to expand the front lobby into a ticketing area and concession stand, which made room for other important things.
But this became ideal space for restrooms that met code and could make them adequately sized for the size theater it is. Theaters. So in 1961, in one of the remodelings of the theater, they spaced the floor of the auditorium out for more legroom between rows, so we lost some seats that way. Plus, they put a huge giant screen in front of the proscenium, the original stage, which eliminated some front rows.
The Egyptian is one of only a handful of theaters in the country with an atmospheric dome ceiling. When the surrounding lights are off, twinkling stars illuminate the sky-painted ceiling, creating a nighttime effect in the auditorium.
Gold leaf, you know, the busyness. Lots of three-dimensional plasterwork and such. But then one of the architects started doing these atmospherics, and the people loved them. So it was driven by their popularity, and you don't really get the feeling of the sky until those go out, until they're turned off. This room, there were two sets of columns. Is perfect for the sound coming out of those pipes and the acoustical elements of this room. But conversely, because we have a dome ceiling in here and it's all concrete, it is not the best acoustics for movies and things. But
Necessary updates revealed some interesting details about the theater.
there were two sets of columns. That is the outer proscenium that you're looking at. Back in about 10 feet and inward, so the stage opening was not as wide, was the inner proscenium. And it was within that inner proscenium where the original screen was and everything else. In other words, the seats went clear down past. But what the pillars that were removed were the inner pillars, because here, 18 months after they put in these beautiful curtains, along comes CinemaScope, the wide picture, 2.5 times as wide as it is high. Well, theaters like the Egyptian had a tough time because of the narrow width of the proscenium. And so they come in and chopped them out, and I hate to break this to you, but those pillars are an illusion. There's a central core, concrete core that runs up and down, and then this is plaster built around them, which is the way most of these theaters are. That's when they move the screen out in front. But it was interesting when they came in to restore the theater, the only full pillar that was left was this one. This one had been cut in half. The back of this original building was not symmetrical. The code, for one thing, back in 1924. A lot of these tunnels that air went through were just dug out of dirt. There was no cement walls or there were ceilings or anything. And the sewer pipes ran through those too. It was amazing.
So do you think it smells fantastic?
This theater got so pitiful. I didn't even come in here the last years it was open. I couldn't stand it. It would be like looking at someone dying of some awful disease.
Not well.
There's just no way. So anyway, it was important, especially when this was changed into a performing arts center, that you had adequate restroom facilities, adequate lobby space, because you always have intermissions and things in the middle of live production.
Architects decided to move the hieroglyphic panels around the corners when they opened up the lobby.
In the movie of those, that one or both of them got broken, they took and molded them first, so they had I don't know, that rubbery, I don't know what it was made of, copies that they could replicate the exact artwork. And luckily, I can say they didn't need them. They were able to move these around the corner and place them in the places they are. Now, over this lobby was repainted several times, and in the 1951 refurbishing, which generally was very elegant, but that's when they got rid of all of this stencil painting, and that took weeks to paint those stencils on there. It was fascinating to see them. But I remember as a kid walking into the kids show, the first day, week that it had its official reopening, and even though it was beautiful and Egyptian, they had painted over all of those little coves and the big concrete beams and that in what amounted to a fluorescent pink. And so that part became very plain.
The neon glowing lighting in the lobby was replaced with incandescent bulbs.
Back to its 1924 roots. Here's all this neon had to come out. There was some there, and then the big snack bar was up against the wall in the foyer there, the Egyptian. And the amazing thing to me is that was at least from 1951, and it would have been installed late that year, and was in there until the demolition in 1994, somewhere in there. Burned every day, all day, into the night. I took it out and put it in the ceiling.
When it came time to repaint, most of the Egyptian didn't change, even by a shade.
I do know that it was pretty much local artisans and companies that did it. Now, when we restored it, we contracted Conrad Schmidt Studios out of New Berlin, Wisconsin, and they specialize in church and theater restorations because they're about the same. But their people actually came in here and with chemicals washed sections of the paint off down to where they got as far as they could go, and then they took samples, little minuscule samples of the paint, took it back to their laboratory, put it under a microscope, and went through layers of paint, dirt, to get down to the actual color that was the original color.
Wow. Screen
And
out?
so that was in 1951. They had just put these fabulous, beautiful new drapes on the stage. By the way, in 1951, now in 1961, even though it was horrendous, this whole auditorium was painted pink. I've seen other theaters across the country. And the exits, when you're standing here, you're one level underground. And so these original front exits went through it into a tunnel, and you went under the alleyway out there, and then into the boiler building, which was on the other side of the alley, and you came up a ramp. Then you had to make a U-turn and come up the ramp farther and farther. And as you opened the door, if you made it through there, you came out facing the theater. And when they tore down the boiler room building and that, they had to change these exits, and so you walked in there, and then there were stairs that went up to the exit on that side. On this side, they had to chop half that pillar away. A couple of things they found, which was amazing. They found that these two pillars were not sitting on a foundation. They were on dirt. CinemaScope screen went in, it was permanently mounted to the stage floor, and so that second curtain disappeared altogether. The place was, they were getting ready to paint and everything else, and I always remember those as being painted blue, like you were looking out at the sky. And I looked at the one picture that's in that book that I gave you, and I always remember those as being painted blue, like you were looking out at the sky. And I looked at the one picture that's in that book that I gave you of the interior here, and you could see in that one window up there that there was curtains hanging in it. So I immediately called Mike Sanders, the architect. I says, Mike, this theater, of course, is outside. I said, it makes sense. You're looking into buildings. I've got a picture I can show you. There's drapes in those windows. The restoration architects marveled. So we got that fixed at the last their accomplishments.
One of the most significant items at the Egyptian is the Wurlitzer organ. Originally, the organ was used as a staple in movie palaces during intermissions and silent films. Today, it is a historical treasure.
Put in. The original organ was taken out here in 1960, and was much smaller. It only had 11 ranks of pipes, 11 groups. That console was built for a pizza parlor. A lot of these wonderful instruments were given away, thrown away, or either way ended up in pizza parlors across the country. It sounds bizarre, but you know, it saved a lot of these instruments, which now most of them are back in auditoriums, if not movie palaces. It was finally realized after a lot of them were destroyed how wonderful they are and how important they are. Replace this. That organ is valued at between $750,000 and $1 million. Wow. Installed.
Historical movie palaces are some of the United States' most beautiful and beloved sites. Although they require much more maintenance and upgrades, movie palace aficionados say they offer so much more than the modern movie experience.
Well, the upkeep on an older building is always more expensive than on a newer building, but I think it adds to the character and make people want to come here that it's actually a theater, not a mall.
It's because of the people like Van Summerhill, Fred Mills, and Donna Lown that historic movie theaters are still around for all to enjoy.